Another week, and still the establishment are telling you to shut up and move on. If you've got questions about the election, you're a conspiracy theorist. If you point to the flaws in mail-in voting, you're a racist vote suppressor. If you think voters should be given important information about the candidates before the election, not after, you're undermining democracy. If you think elections should be run according to the Constitution, you're somehow a traitor trying to destroy the country. But more than a third of all Americans don't trust the 2020 election results. 70% of Republicans think the election was rigged because of voter fraud. Even some Democrats think that. Are all these people conspiracy theorists? Over 100 million Americans are racist bigots who want civil war? Apparently so, according to the establishment media.
All of these baseless and false and crazy allegations of election fraud.
Baseless conspiracy theories about his loss.
None, zero, zilch, nada, nil, nothing. No evidence of widespread voter fraud.
These claims and allegations that are totally baseless.
It's staggering that a sitting president of the United States would try to overturn the results of a perfectly fair and well-executed election. Remarkably well-executed election during a pandemic.
Unbelievable. Don't the establishment idiots realize that the more they tell people to shut up and move on, the more they'll dig in and fight back with facts? It is a fact that Democrats pushed massive late changes to the voting system for partisan ends. It was all in Pelosi's notorious H.R. 1 years before the virus. It is a fact that the exact changes they implemented are those that election experts and the non-partisan commission led by James Baker and former President Jimmy Carter said were most likely to produce fraud and error. It is a fact that the US Constitution puts the power to change election rules in the hands of state legislators, not the executive or judicial branch, and it's a fact that this was not how the Democrats' partisan late changes were made. And it is a fact that even as the establishment dismissed and censored allegations of Biden corruption, a criminal investigation was underway and had been for years. All these facts should give every American legitimate concerns about this election and the whole system. If the establishment had any interest in actually building trust in our democracy, they'd stop telling you to shut up and move on and instead call for a proper investigation, like we did last week in our message to Mitch McConnell. Of course, we got nothing back, but it's worse than nothing. This week, the establishment announced that it would literally shut you up. YouTube said on Wednesday they will censor anything which, quote, misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 US presidential election. The word Orwellian is overused, but it applies twice over to big tech. Of course, their censorship reminds us of 1984, Big Brother watching you, policing what you say and think. But there's another Orwell book that big tech calls to mind, Animal Farm. It's an allegory for communism, how communists seized power in the name of the people, but once they got it, behaved just like the despots they replaced. Silicon Valley tech founders claimed they were democratizing information to put power in people's hands. They've ended up controlling information to take power away from the people and put it in the hands of the establishment, of which they are now such a sinister part. Big tech interfered in the election alongside the media in the alliance of bias. They suppressed information that could have hurt their candidate, information about the Biden family's influence peddling operation with a hostile foreign power, America's #1 enemy, China. But Biden's own transition team this week confirmed that Biden's son is under federal investigation. Polling has shown that over a third of Biden voters hadn't heard anything about this before the election, and millions would not have voted for him if they had. Which makes it unconscionable that it was covered up, not just by the alliance of bias, but as we now know, by Attorney General Barr himself. All this makes one thing clear. The establishment hates Trump and his movement and will do anything to stop it. They tried to stop Trump getting elected. When that failed, they tried to cripple him with endless investigations and their Russia conspiracy theory. They tried to block him delivering his promises, even from within his own administration, on endless war, on open borders, on globalist trade deals. Whatever you voted for, they tried to stop Trump doing it. But we have a president who never stops fighting, and he beat them in the end. The result? The best economy for working Americans we've ever seen. The forgotten men and women lifted up as promised. The establishment's 50-year failure on China, trade, manufacturing and immigration, confronted and defeated. We got the new conservative populism that Trump promised. Pro-business on tax and regulation, pro-worker on trade and immigration. And how the establishment hated it. They pretended it didn't even happen. Here's Biden's establishment crony Janet Yellen the other day as he introduced her as his nominee for Treasury Secretary.
We risk missing the obligation to address deeper structural problems, inequality, stagnant wages, especially for workers who lack a college education, gender disparities that keep women out of the workforce.
Every single thing she said was wrong. It was her establishment economics that caused those problems and Trump's conservative populism that started to solve them. Under Yellen, inequality went up. With Trump, it came down. Under Yellen, wages for workers without a college degree went down. With Trump, they went up. Communities that were hollowed out under Yellen were revived with Trump. With Trump, the racial pay gap narrowed. The home ownership gap narrowed. More women entered the workforce than at any time in history. What are you even talking about, Janet Yellen? I thought you were supposed to be an economist. You can't even do basic math. But the results of Trump's populism don't matter to the establishment. They just hate him and his movement, and they want their power back, as their arrogance over this election clearly shows. So we need to wise up and fight back hard. It's time to take on the source of the establishment's power, the rigged system they've built for themselves. You've heard of rules for radicals. Here are some rules for populists. Government has become too big and too centralized for the people to control. Federal departments and agencies are a magnet for the leeches and lobbyists in Washington. They must be broken up and power returned to the people, as the Constitution demands in the 10th Amendment. We've got to break up big business too. That's where the wage stagnation and inequality came from. Big firms swallowing small ones. There's less competition, so less need to raise wages to attract workers and more money to pay top executives. And then the swamp, where the corruption happens, the dinners, the drinks, the revolving door between big business and big government. This is what they really care about. It's fine for them to go into government and get rich like the Clintons, but if you're already successful and go into government like the Trumps, they try to crush you. They're still hounding Ivanka over room charges at the Trump Hotel during her father's inauguration. But Biden's family spends years making money off his government role, and they cover it up. Enough. President Trump needs to make sure an independent special prosecutor is appointed to investigate Biden corruption and expose the workings of the swamp so we can blow the whole thing out of its disgusting, mucky water. The establishment have shown us this year they'll stop at nothing to keep their power and privilege. We need to fight back. We need to strike at the heart of their power. We need to show that the next revolution is just getting started.